It says medicine can be applied on the basis of similar or opposite symptoms, that is homeopathy or antipathy. And the other possible mode of employing medicine for disease besides these two is allopathy. See, in homeopathy, it is based on similar symptoms, antipathy based on opposite symptoms, and when the disease and medicines are at different planes altogether, then it is said to be allopathy. Aphorism 23 says that antipathic, enantiopathic, or palliative, these method of treatment, this causes transient or apparent elevation. And after that, they break forth again only with increased intensity. This is specially for chronic cases. This is especially for chronic cases. So they become aggravated after antipathic or palliative treatment. Okay. Aphorism 24 says that homeopathic treatment, there remains therefore no other mode of employing medicines in diseases that promises to be of service besides the homeopathy. Aphorism 25 says that in all pure experiences, the sole and infallible oracle of healing art, what it teaches us is that only symptoms similar to those observable in case of disease under treatment, and only doses of suitable potency and attenuation rapidly and radically can cure the totality of the symptoms. Aphorism 26 is about the nature's law of cure. A weaker dynamic affection is permanently extinguished in the living organism by a stronger one if the latter, whilst differing in kind, is very similar to the former in its manifestations. So, the nature's law of cure says that when a weaker dynamic affection is affecting our individual and we prescribe a medicine which is acting on the same plane but is of a stronger character, then it will combat the disease. Okay. And the footnote shows that this a cure applies to both physical affections as well as moral affections. For example, if a person is getting an offending odor, that can be cured not by a nice scene, but it can be cured only by a more intense and nice smell. And in moral maladies, it says that if a person is disturbed because of his or her circumstances, he can feel better only when he is told about others' sufferings. Aphorism 27. Aphorism 27 says that curative power of medicine, therefore, depends on the symptoms similar to the disease, but superior to it in strength. So each individual case of disease is most surely, radically, rapidly, and permanently annihilated. Aphorism 28 says it does not matter how the cure takes place. See, Hahnemann says that a scientific explanation of how the cure takes place is not very important. Though again in aphorism 29, he talks about the modus operandi. Modus operandi is how the medicinal cure takes place, right? So when the medicinal potency is somewhat stronger, then the natural weaker disease disappears. What happens is when we prescribe a medicinal agent which acts on similar plane as that of symptoms, and it is of a stronger character, it occupies exactly the same position and the same parts that is being affected by the natural disease. So when it covers those parts or it affects those parts, thereby the original natural disease is cured. And now what remains is a medicinal disease, which is in our hands. And the potency is that we select is so small that it subsides on its own. The vital force doesn't have to produce a wild reaction. Aphorism 30. Aphorism 30 says that the human body, which is much more powerfully affected in its health by medicines than by natural morbid stimuli. The conditions are that aphorism 31 says disease force is conditional. The natural disease that affects us is always conditional. See, they are the inimical forces which are partly physical and partly psychical, right? To which our existence is exposed. They do not possess the power of affecting everyone unconditionally. Only those people whose susceptibility is high towards a disease, or who have a tendency to fall ill, their immunity is low, only they will catch the disease. All the patients or all the persons will not fall ill. Whereas the medicines act unconditionally. The artificial morbific agents, which we term medicines, they act all the times. They act on all the provers when we give them to healthy people, and they act in all the diseased when we give them in a form of curative medicine. Aphorism 33 says that living human organism has a greater liability to be acted on by medicinal power than by morbific noxious agents and infectious miasms. So living human organism, that is us, we have a liability to be acted upon more by medicine than by the natural diseases. In the footnote, it's written that in 1801, for epidemic of scarlatina sydenham, it prevailed among children and attacked most of the children. But a similar epidemic when occurred in Koningslutter and patient took belladonna, children who took belladonna were not affected. So hereby we can also say that medicines are more powerful because they have a tendency of preventing a disease. Aphorism 34 says, 2 points necessary for cure of natural disease by artificial disease. Artificial disease is that which is produced by the medicine. So what are the 2 most important points? First, that the medicine should be capable of producing an artificial disease as similar as possible to the natural disease, and it should be slightly higher in power or slightly more powerful. Okay. Aphorism 35. Aphorism 35 is a heading, and here he has discussed, Dr. Hahnemann has discussed that what happens when 2 dissimilar diseases meet. In aphorism 36, he says the first condition where when 2 dissimilar diseases meet. Here he says if the 2 dissimilar diseases, the first one that was already affecting the patient is stronger than the second one, which is now affecting or now attacking the patient, then the second disease will not affect the patient. Why? Because it will be repelled by the first one. Example of this is like if a patient is suffering from a chronic disease and an autumnal dysentery sort of a disease is trying to attack the patient, he will not be affected because he is already suffering from a chronic disease which is much more stronger. Aphorism 37 is about a similar case when we are trying to treat a patient with medicines that are dissimilar to the case. So however strong medicines we give them to a chronic patient, they will not be cured until and unless we give them a similar medicine. Aphorism 38 says the second condition when the new dissimilar disease is stronger. So now what happens? The original weaker disease which was already affecting the patient is subdued. Subdued in the sense it stays in the patient, but it is kept back for some time. The new disease will run its full course, and when it is over, the first disease or the weaker disease will come up again. Okay. And there are examples like a patient had epilepsy and the attack stopped when he started having a ringworm affection. And once the ringworm was cured or it went away by itself, the epileptic attack started attacking the patient again. Similarly, it is said for medicines also in aphorism 39. Now coming to aphorism 40. Aphorism 40 says that when the new disease, after having acted on the organism for a long time, it joins the old disease. Why? Because both the diseases are first dissimilar to each other, and second, both of them are equally strong. So after attacking the patient and acting for a long time, both the diseases actually combine together. Combine in the sense that they affect the part that is more specific to them. For example, a patient had a psychotic ward, and now SORA has attacked. Now the SORA will attack the patient, and when it has acted for a long time, it will combine with psychosis. That means that psychosis will affect the one part and SORA will affect another part. But both will be there in the patient. This kind of disease becomes more difficult to cure. They are called complex diseases. This is a similar manner in which mass venereal diseases are formed. In aphorism 41, you have to remember this. Aphorism 41 is about mass venereal diseases. This disease is venereal disease when complicated with psora because of allopathic mercurial treatment. It gives rise to a hideous monster. Hideous monster because it is very difficult to cure such cases. Coming to aphorism 42. Now, 2 or 3 dissimilar diseases can also occur in a patient. It has been seen in nature that 2 or 3 diseases have also remained in a patient, and they have not annihilated or cured one another, but they were there in the patient. Aphorism 43 says that when 2 similar diseases meet, they cure one another, because similar diseases can neither repel each other, they can neither suspend each other, and neither can they stay together. So basically, aphorism 44 explains it again. In a double complex disease, 2 similar diseases can neither repel one another nor suspend one another, nor can they exist beside each other in an organism to form a double complex disease. So ultimately, what happens is cure, perfect cure. Okay. In aphorism 45, when 2 diseases differing in kind but very similar in manifestation and symptoms, they produce, when they meet in one organism, the stronger medicine or the stronger disease will annihilate the weaker, because the same parts are affected, and the stronger disease covers exactly those parts that were affected by the weaker disease. And so now the vital force has just to arouse itself slightly for a perfect cure. Now, what is written in aphorism 46? Aphorism 46, he has given examples of homeopathic cures by similar diseases. Also, 46 aphorism is important for accessory miasm such as cowpox. Now, what he has mentioned is that after inoculation of cowpox vaccine, the patients also suffered from eruptions which were quite similar to the eruptions that got cured in patients. So this he says was a accessory miasm of cowpox, because apart from cowpox, it also produced another kind of eruptions. Aphorism 46 also says that smallpox produced ophthalmia and even blindness in some patients, whereas it has also cured chronic ophthalmia and blindness when it occurred in a patient of blindness. Smallpox, it can cause deafness and dyspnea. And when it occurred in a patient who was deaf or had dyspnea, it has cured that symptom. Aphorism 41 says that thus nothing could teach a physician in a more convincing manner what kind of medicine he should choose for rapid and permanent cure. So, what kind of medicine should he choose? He should choose medicines that are most similar in manifestation and in a slightly higher potency or slightly higher power. Aphorism 48 says, neither in nature nor in practice do we ever see a malady which is being cured by dissimilar morbific agents, be it ever so strong. So only one that is similar and slightly stronger can cure the disease. 49 aphorism says, we would have been able to meet with more real homeopathic cures of this kind if our attention would have been more directed this way. Right? So aphorism 50, I'm sorry, says problem with the nature's cure. See, it is all about nature and homeopathy. So problem with nature's cure. What happens when we depend on nature for cure? So after they have affected cure, they itself require curing. What happens is only few natural diseases are very similar in nature. But the thing is that if a person is having blindness and now he has smallpox, his blindness will be cured. But isn't smallpox a more dreadful disease? Now, smallpox has to run its whole course. You cannot stop it like you can stop the dose of medicine. So it is not in our hands. So it is a very dangerous procedure. Also, we have to wait for a long time for a natural disease of similar nature to affect that patient. Right? So they require cure, and they are difficult, uncertain, and also dangerous. So we cannot depend on nature. Aphorism 51 says, advantage of medicine over nature's cure, calls nature a happy-go-lucky operation. Why happy-go-lucky? because it is very casual. For the natural disease, we have to wait for the natural disease to come and affect the patient. But in case of medicines, we have a number of medicines, lots of medicines, we have many numbers, and those can also be altered, and it is not so violent in attack. And all, the most important thing is it will bring a rapid, permanent, and gentle cure in the patient. Now, what does aphorism 52 say? It says there are two principal methods of cure. One is homeopathic and the other is allopathic or heteropathic. And he who does not know either practices both according to the pleasure of patient. This is called criminal treason against homeopathy, right? Aphorism 53 says that true mild cure takes place in homeopathy. Pure homeopathic healing art is a straight way to cure, as certain as there is but one straight line between two given points. So it is as simple as that. We have a disease, we have a cure. It is we have a disease and we have homeopathy to cure it. So it is like two different 2 points, and we have drawn a single straight line. It is not going zigzag, hayway, any other way. So it is very simple as that. For every cure, you have to give homeopathic medicine. Coming to aphorism 54, allopathic system of medicine honored itself as rational system of medicine. They said that homeopathic medicine is not scientific, and their method of treatment was rational. It was more scientific, and according to them, they were following the nature. Aphorism 55 says that allopathic system survived only because of palliative relief. Okay, so because it gave quick relief in some cases, it survived. Aphorism 56 says antipathic mode introduced by Galen, Contraria contraris, it is a very hurtful mode of treatment. Footnote says third mode of employing medicine is isopathy. Isopathy was introduced by M. Lux, and it is like curing a disease by giving the same contagious principle. So if a person is having sepsis, you take out that material from the sepsis and you give it to the patient. The In few cases cure happened, but that was only when it somehow turned, the potency was changed and it acted homeopathically. Only then cure took place. Otherwise, isopathy can only bring aggravations. What does aphorism 57 say? Aphorism 57 says that antipathic method, medicines are given for one troublesome symptom only, and attention is not paid at all to the other symptoms, right? So, for that one troublesome symptom, it produces an opposite state, and hence it gives palliative relief. Examples like large dose of opium benumbs the sensibility of all sorts. So if a patient is having chronic cough, they used to give opium, the chronic cough will be reduced for some time, but what will happen again? Again, it will increase twofold, threefold, and like this, it will go on increasing. Aphorism 58 says, this mode of employing medicine is an extremely faulty symptomatic treatment, and the physician treats in a one sided manner only, and aggravation follows in every case. Okay. Aphorism 59 says, calls antipathic remedy as antagonistic or statutory. Examples of antipathic cures like pain suppression by opium and sleepiness by coffee. See, another example that is given is a patient had nocturnal cough and opium was given. So, opium, what will it do? It will suppress every irritation. The patient will be relieved for tonight. But what will happen in the next night? The cough will be increased. And what will happen again? They will give an increased dose of opium. So, subsequently, the cough goes on increasing. Aphorism 60 says, for every aggravation in antipathic, the physician gives stronger dose, thereby an equal transient suppression is effected. And this keeps continuing, but never a cure takes place. This is happening today also. See, when we see an allopathic or an antipathic prescription of a physician, we see that they have given a medicine, an example 40 mg. If the patient is not relieved, they increase it to 60, then they increase it to 80. So they just keep on increasing the dose, but the patient is not getting cured. In footnote, Hahnemann has also mentioned about Brogeo. Brogeo was a very devastating physician. Why I'm calling him devastating? Because he had a very vague method of treatment. He thought of mixing drugs to give relief to the patient. And not only that, he thought that if the patient is complaining, if he is suffering from pain and he is shouting, we should depress the vital force. We should depress or benumb the patient. So he said that let the patient bleed. He used to apply lots of leeches. The vital fluid was lost. Blood was known as the vital fluid. The vital fluid was lost. The patient became exhausted, that he complaining. And then the remark that the physicians made were that see, the patient is getting relief. That is why he is not complaining now. Also, what he did was in chronic cases, he used to deprive patients of food. Again, another way of depressing the vitality of the patient. So this was a very vague treatment that he followed, and his followers used to follow it for a long time, after which it was boycotted. Now, aphorism 61 says true healing art is opposite, exactly opposite of antipathic, which is homeopathic. Aphorism 63. Aphorism 63 says the primary action of medicine and vital powers conjointly. I'm sorry. See, aphorism 63 talks about the primary action of the medicine. So the primary action is actually not only the action of the medicine, but here the medicine is acting in an active manner and the vital force is also acting. How? It is letting the medicine act. It is like joining of two hands. The medicinal force is acting in an active manner and the vital force is acting in a welcoming manner, or we can say that it is letting the medicinal force act. So it is a conjoint action. Always remember, primary action is a conjoint action. Okay, it is acting in a passive manner. See, what is aphorism 64 saying? And the secondary action is due to the action of the vital force when it reverts back. Okay, so aphorism 64 says primary action, the vital force conducts in a passive manner. It permits the impression of the medicine and then it rouses itself to develop the secondary action. Secondary action is of two types, remember, secondary counteraction and secondary curative action. So when the medicines will be in large doses, large potencies, what will happen? The vital force will react even more and it will produce a secondary counteraction. But when it comes to homeopathy and when it comes to small doses, what we do? We are just prescribing a similar medicine in very small doses, just slightly stronger than the natural disease. So what happens? The natural disease goes off and the medicinal disease, because of the small dose, it can go off by itself. The vital force need not rouse itself so violently. So here what we'll have is secondary curative action, not counteraction. In counteraction, exact opposite state is produced. Now what aphorism 65 says, there are few examples that are being discussed. Like hand bathed in hot water. What happens? First, the hand will feel warmer than the other hand. This is the primary action. The other hand was not treated with warm water. Only one hand is treated. This is primary action. But when you take out that hand becomes slightly cold and then colder than the other hand. So this is secondary counteraction. Again, if a person does violent exercise, this is primary action. What is the secondary counteraction? He will feel chilliness, right? If we put an arm in cold water, this is primary action. It becomes colder. But when you take it out and wait for some time, it becomes warmer than the other hand. This is secondary counteraction. If a person is very vivacious, very talkative, very active, and you give him strong coffee, right? He will become drowsy, very drowsy in the secondary counteraction. What aphorism 66 says is small dose of homeopathic medicines. They are such small doses that they act very slightly in the primary action. So if they have a very small primary action, the secondary action will be secondary curative action and not a counter action. Aphorism 67. Aphorism 67 says, where antipathy is indicated. There are few conditions where antipathy is definitely indicated, where there are most urgent cases and there is danger to life, like where you cannot wait for the action of homeopathic medicines, like antidotes for sudden poisonings, drowning, electric current affection, alkalis, minerals, pepper sulfur, metallic poisonings, and coffee and camphor for poisoning by opium. Right? Aphorism 68 says, in homeopathic cures, uncommon small doses of medicine is required. Symptom similar symptom similarity should be there. So there is destruction of the latter, destruction of the original disease, and vital force did not arouse much violently. So there is transient disappearance and rapid cure of the patient. Aphorism 69 says that antipathically chosen medicine touches precisely the same disease point in organism as does the homeopathic medicine. So that is only one point that is important for antipathic treatment, that actually it touches the same point where homeopathy touches, whereas allopathy, it is entirely different. Aphorism 70. Aphorism 70 is a conclusion of what we have studied so far. So aphorism 70 is divided into few points. It says that everything that is of a morbid character or which needs treatment will show itself by signs and symptoms. Then it says that derangement of state of health, which we call disease, can only be converted to health. How? By giving a medicine which acts on the same dynamic plane. And then he says that natural disease can never be cured by medicine that produce symptoms that are differing in kind. They should be similar in kind only for treatment. So we should give medicines homeopathically. And then he says that antipathic treatment is merely palliative treatment and it is not good for long-standing cases. So the only mode of treatment that is important is homeopathy, where we have to select the symptoms on the basis of medicine on the totality of symptoms and produce a medicinal artificial disease to cure the natural disease. Coming to aphorism 71. Now, aphorism 71 says 3 points necessary for cure are: first, knowledge of disease; second, knowledge of medicine; and third, most suitable method of employing the medicine. Aphorism 72. Now we have coming to the knowledge of disease. So we'll be discussing the types of diseases. So aphorism 72 says acute diseases. Acute diseases are rapid morbid processes which finish their course more or less quickly in a moderate time. Okay, so their beginning is perceptible. In acute diseases, the beginning is perceptible. We'll get to know when the disease starts, and the course is also very short. It is not very long course, and they finish it quickly. Either the patient will recover or the patient will die. This is the definition of acute disease. What happens in chronic disease? In chronic disease, small, often imperceptible beginnings. The patient will not know when the disease started. Okay, and they derange the living organism, each in its own peculiar manner, and gradually they deviate or infection to the chronic miasm. So this was basically because of a chronic miasm. Okay, now the types of acute diseases. First is individual acute disease. They attack human beings individually, and mostly because this is of transient exploration of latent sora. So sora slowly returns to its dormant state. What is sporadic disease? Sporadic diseases, they attack several persons at same time here and there, sporadically. The cause can be meteoric or telluric influences. Third important cause is epidemic diseases. Now, many persons are attacked with similar sufferings from the same cause. Aphorism, this aphorism has a footnote in which 1801, a kind of Purpura miliaris, its prophylactic and curative medicine was aconite, and scarlet fever, the prophylactic and curative remedy was belladonna. Also, they have discussed acute miasms here. So you have to remember aphorism 73 for acute miasms. Acute miasms are those that occur once in a lifetime. They are smallpox, measles, whooping cough, scarlet fever, and those that recur frequently are plague, yellow fever, and cholera. Okay. Aphorism 74, again, it is very important. It's artificial chronic diseases. Now, what are artificial chronic diseases? They are drug diseases. They are produced because of allopathic treatment. And by prolonged use of violent heroic medicines in large and increasing doses. Okay. Aphorism 75 is artificial diseases are most deplorable and most incurable. It is very difficult to treat such cases. Aphorism 76 is about artificial chronic diseases. These must be remedied by the vital force itself because it takes a long time. The patient should be left for the vital force to act and cure it, and only certain symptoms can be treated homeopathically or with other methods. If the patient dies due to such a treatment, the physician at post-mortem examination points out to the internal organic disfigurements. They will say that the pathology was so severe that the patient has died. They will never accept that it is because of their treatment that the patient could not survive. Aphorism 77. Aphorism 77 is about inappropriately named chronic diseases, or also known as pseudo-chronic diseases. See, they cannot be called chronic diseases because they are only because of a maintaining cause. If you remove that maintaining cause, the disease will be cured. The patient will be better. So we cannot call them chronic diseases. That is why they are called inappropriately named chronic diseases. Coming down to aphorism 78. Aphorism 78 says, true natural chronic diseases, they arise from a chronic miasm, and the most robust construction, the best regulated mode of living, and most vigorous are also insufficient for their eradication. That means when a person is affected by a chronic disease, it is because of a chronic miasm. And however good the mode of life, and however good the vigorous exercise or whatever robust constitution the patient has, he will not be able to get over it on his own. He or she will need homeopathic treatment for the cure. Aphorism 79. Aphorism 79 says that syphilis alone was known as a chronic miasmatic disease. Firstly, only syphilis was known. Later on, psychosis was also recognized. That was afterwards. Psychosis was called the condylomatous disease. Aphorism 30 is about the 80 is about the chronic miasm of Sora. Now, Sora is the only real fundamental cause and producer of all other numerous forms of diseases. So, syphilitic and psychosis, they are venereal causes or venereal miasms, and Sora is non-venereal. It is the cause of all other non-venereal diseases, and it is the fundamental cause of most of the diseases. That is why Sora is called hydra-headed. Hahnemann had spent 12 years, 1816 to 1828, to find out the source of a number of chronic diseases. Because he was giving medicines, the patient was better for a time, but then the patient was coming back and was not relieved. So Hahnemann was disturbed and he started working on this. See, aphorism 81 says, Sora, the extremely ancient infecting agent, has gradually passed in some hundreds of generations, and Sora can now display such innumerable morbid forms in the great family of mankind. What actually was Sora? Initially, Sora was only itch, or even the itch or like leprosy. So the itch was so small and so violent that what happened, the patient earlier, the patient people used to wear woolen clothes, so their itch was, they had severe itch and it was transmitted from one person to another person very easily. But it also had a destructive form like leprosy, and those patients were kept aside, so it did not spread so fast. But later on, with time, what happened, people started wearing cotton clothes, they started living more cleanly environment, in a more cleanly environment, and the disastrous look of Sora, it reduced to small itch eruptions only, and they are such small eruptions that they get transmitted easily. If we shake hands, if we share same clothes, this way it got transmitted. So now the secondary symptoms of Sora are such wild and such widespread that it is very difficult to understand. See, it says, a footnote says, every epidemic must be considered new. Sydenham alone perceived this when he insists upon necessity of not considering an epidemic disease as having occurred before and treating it in same way as another. See, we are being taught this from the very beginning, that do not consider any disease as a disease that has occurred before. Always take case freshly, always consider a disease new, and never try and prescribe the same medicine. Okay. Now coming down to aphorism 83. See, aphorism 83 to 104 is about case taking. Aphorism 83 says, in individualizing examination of a case of disease, demands a physician nothing but freedom from prejudice and sound senses. So what is case taking? Case taking is individualizing examination of a disease. Okay. And what does a physician need for that? He should have freedom from prejudice. He should have sound senses, and he should be very observant, and there should be fidelity in tracing the picture of the disease. That means he should create the picture accurately. What does the aphorism 84 says? It says, do not interrupt. Keeping silence himself, he allows the patient to say all they have to say. Why? Because every interruption breaks the train of thought of the patient. Okay, so we should only interrupt the patient if he is wandering off to some other topic. Otherwise, we should let them speak. We should not interrupt in any way. Aphorism 85 says that begin a fresh line with every new circumstance that is mentioned. So whenever a patient mentions a new symptom, we should begin from a fresh line, and we should keep some space so that when we have to ask something ourselves, we can fill in that place. Aphorism 86 says, when the narrators have finished, the physician then reverts to each particular symptom and elicits more precise information respecting it. So when the patient has finished talking about his symptoms or talking about his complaint, then we can go back to each symptom and talk about and ask questions that we need to ask, like modalities. We can also ask the character of discharge, anything like that. Aphorism 87 says no direct question should be asked, because every direct question has an answer like yes or no. And the patient who is trying to impress a physician or who is trying to be affirmative, so they can give the answer either in a yes or no. It will not be very clear to the physician. Aphorism 88, it says, if in these voluntary details nothing has been mentioned, the physician asks what can be told in regard to these parts or state of disposition of mind. See, after taking whatever the patient has said, we can go back to the case taking and see whatever the patient has missed. Okay, so when he has missed something, we can go and ask. Aphorism 89 says, when the patient for it is him we have chiefly to rely for description, has by these details giving of his own accord, in answer to inquiries, furnish the requisite information, and we have now made a perfect picture of the disease. Now the physician can ask whatever more questions